กลับเข้าสู่ช่วงที่ 2 ของรายการ Money Forum ค่ะในช่วงนี้มาติดตามกับอีกหนึ่งงานสัมมนากับเรื่องของอนาคตผู้ประกอบการวิชาชีพบัญชีจากตัวแทนผู้ประกอบการของประเทศมาเลเซียสิงคโปร์และประเทศไทยที่ต้องรับมือกับความเปลี่ยนแปลงที่จะเกิดขึ้นในอนาคตนะคะกับงานสัมมนาในหัวข้อ ASEAN Perspective on Digital Economy ค่ะ
It's my honor to be a moderator for this special session and during this session you will hear about the digital economy, how is that involved in the three major economies in ASEAN, being Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. Okay, so now I'm very pleased to introduce our three distinguished panelists who had a great wealth of experience in the accountancy professions. They are also a senior key leaders in their accountancy profession in their respective country. Okay, so I'm glad that they are going to share with us their view and their experience and how their country are preparing for the digital economy today. So let me firstly introduce Mr. Gerard Ee, the President of Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountant or ISCA. And the second person next to Mr. Ee is Dato Mohammad Faiz Asmi, the President of Malaysia Institute of Accountants or MIA. Last but not least, of course, our President of the Federation Accounting Professions, FAP in Thailand, Kun Prasan Chirpanit. Okay, I think as I mentioned in the earlier session, we have heard a lot of information and presentation from our two guest speakers, both from the Ministry of Commerce and the Central Bank, on how the Thai government initiative to drive toward the digital economies. So let's now hear from our colleague from the ASEAN. So maybe my very first question start with Singapore. Maybe Gerard, could you share with us in terms of when and how was the digital economy concept have been introduced in Singapore?
Actually, in Singapore, we seriously started working on it since 2014, which is quite recent. Before that, of course, we were talking about IT, computers, but here we are talking about digital economy, which is very different. We are talking about the convergence of everything into one source. So today, with a smartphone, you do every transaction. So even credit card is going to be obsolete. So this morning, the speaker mentioned about the digital sandbox. I think that's very important that regulators must be involved with the financial sector to develop fintech. So along the way, regulatory framework can be adjusted and not wait until the product is ready and then scramble to change the regulations to accommodate it. So that way it's more efficient. In Singapore, we have established a research, innovation, and enterprise group. So for 2016 to 2020, the government has committed $19 billion over that 5 years towards research, but applied research. I think there's always been research by universities and all that, and usually it's for publication. So our focus now is really applied research, is to see things happening, but you have to enable it. And therefore, we also sponsor, the government sponsors incubation park, where young startups will find that it is cheap enough that they can afford to come and experiment and come up with their ideas. Most Singaporeans stay in government housing, government-sponsored housing, so the rules have been amended to allow them to do their incubation at home as well. But the point I want to make this morning is we are all trying to develop end products for the digital economy. What is important is the people's mindset hasn't changed to deal with the new requirements of digital economy. So we need to prepare not just accountants but everyone for that future, and you have to work backwards to the school system. So now even in our primary school, they are being taught how to do coding. And you have to start from that age. So by the time they go to universities, they are very familiar with doing coding. And if they choose to be an accountant, they can be an accountant who can develop products for the accounting sector, or you want to be doctors, you can use your skills in coding to develop whatever it is. So a mindset shift through education is very important now to prepare for 15 years down the road while we try to develop new products now. And you know, people, the older we are, like people like myself, I have a smartphone, but I only use half the features because I cannot figure out how the rest work. You know, so, but the younger ones use more. My son, my daughter are much better at it, so I have to take advice from them. But it is the mindset shift. So education, preparing them. The other thing about education which I want to emphasize is how we educate people. All our children, and I think any country in ASEAN is the same, in school, we teach them there's only one answer. But for the digital economy, you must teach children to ask questions. And like the chairman of Tata, he says, the thing is to question the unquestionable. If they cannot change the way of their thinking and we still educate our children the way we educate them now, they will not be prepared for the future. Because the digital economy is unpredictable. Anything can happen.
Thank you very much. I think that's very useful because probably when Singapore started this concept, I think it's probably about the same time where our Thai government have looked at this digital economy concept in 2014. And I think you're probably right in terms of the most important is about the mindset and the education that the people had to change. Okay, maybe a similar question for Dato, if you could share, with us in terms of when and how was the concept of digital economy introduced in your country?
Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. First thing, on behalf of the Malaysians, we'd like to express our condolences on this very sad event, and to thank FAP for inviting us to come share. Now, our story started actually in 1996, because the then Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir, didn't understand IT. So when one of our chief scientists came to him and said, we need to do something, he said, I cannot make a decision on something I don't know. So we apparently spent 3 months flying in experts around the world to teach Tun Mahathir what IT was about. And after 3 months, he said, okay, I know enough, now tell me what you want to do. So that's why in 1996, we set up this thing called the MSC, which is the Multimedia Super Corridor. And that started us thinking, right? So if you look at Malaysia, we have an area called Cyberjaya. We started looking at really 3 elements. One was ICT technology itself. So how do we encourage people to build things there? So we started looking, for example, in Penang to encourage hard drive manufacturers to come there. We started looking around at shared services and data centers. How do we attract them in? The second part was infrastructure, because there's no point inviting them in if there's no place for them to work. So hence we created Cyberjaya, we improved the technology communication lines to it, and of course, you know, what all governments do, they give incentive lah. So we gave lots of tax incentives and people came along. The third element we felt was that, and I guess it goes to the word digital economy. Actually, the key word in this is economy. The digital is just an enabler. So you still have to do business, right? So the question was, how do we encourage Malaysians to think of a different way of doing business? And that was the third component, e-commerce. And like all things in Malaysians, we tend to wait for the government to tell us what to do. So the government itself took a lead. They did what they called the transformation programs. And within the transformation programs, they forced government to upskill themselves. So for example, now, if you want to sell anything to government, you have to go through an e-procurement system. And actually, it reduced a lot of fraud, right? Because everyone had to share their price. It was set in a particular way, and government therefore got a better value for what they purchased. Then they said, oh, maybe we need to pay through e-commerce. So they created an e-commerce system. So that's what we've been doing. And then in 2012, we had a reset, because we realized that, in a way, maybe we were a little bit too early. So we renamed the MSC MDEC. And what MDEC did was they sat down and set a target. So our target now is that by 2020, 20% of the GDP should be ICT related. So as of 2014, we've achieved 17%. We have something like 3,380 companies which are ICT related in Malaysia. We now have about 150,000 knowledge workers within there. And so we are on target for the 2020. The last point maybe just to put is perhaps a perspective as an accountant. I have to say that we accountants have been doing the same things for 200 years. We still audit the same way, you know, we still, okay lah, maybe now we have electronic work papers, very cool, right? But just think of your audit confirmation, right? Well, how do you do a bank confirmation? You go to the client signs the letter, then you post it to the bank loses the letter, then you go back, get another letter, send the letter, then they send the letter to the audit firm, it gets lost, they have to send another letter, and then you find it, and then the client complains, why can't you sign the file? Because I don't have the audit confirmation. I mean, we're doing that for 200 years. So, you know, we're now sitting back thinking as a profession, what can we do towards making the audit process more efficient? So we are exploring doing audit confirmations that way, you know, electronically rather than manual. We're exploring looking at legal confirmations because that's also important. You know, every law firm has a different way of answering a question. So maybe we should standardize the way we ask the question and get the answer back. And then we also realized that people don't read manuals anymore, right? Now, you know, Kun Prasan, Bulat, myself, and also Gerard are from big firms. We realized that even the way our millennials think, there's no point giving them an audit manual and asking them to read it. You have to make a video of 3 minutes for them to understand. You have to come up with a manual in an app for them to understand. So we're having to rethink how we educate our young ones. And I'm afraid to say, we're now going down the YouTube approach, which is doing little videos. So now what we do whenever we have our new recruits, we'll say to them, you guys go film how to do a stock take. And then we use that as part of our training because they can make it far more fun than we can. So I think that's the message. Yes, the country is doing their bit to doing so. And as accountants, I think it's very important for us to understand that things are changing. I mean, how many of you here know what blockchain is? And if you don't, please ask Kun Prasad. He's now an expert, right? It's very important because our clients are changing and we need to figure out how to change with them or we will be obsolete.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good observation. Luckily, I don't have time. I mean, I don't have to spend time follow up those confirmation anymore. So I leave it to the poor junior guy to do all this work. But I think I'm very interested in, I think your first statement that I think the idea of a digital economy is started from your prime minister. And I think that's very important because that's the tone at the top who actually drive. Okay, and I think that's similar to, I think, all the nation in ASEAN. And with that, I think it's also come with the improved infrastructure to support the development of the economy. So I think maybe, Kun Prasan, I'm not sure whether you have anything to add in terms of...
Yes. Well, I think this morning you have heard from Kun Pongpan and Kun Pancha on the government policy. There are two important organizations who direct a lot of things, one from commerce point of view, the another one from the payment system of the financial institution, which financial institution is the key to any economic growth. They are the sort of people who running all sort of information within the economy. And if you look at Thailand in the context of Thailand, we start from Thailand 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now 4.0. Why they have to embark into 4.0? I think the government of Thailand found out about 10 years ago that most of the industry that we are heavy on agricultural products industry, heavy on electronics, heavy on automotive. Very successful. We have about more than 10% GDP growth for the past how many years, I'm not quite sure, until 1997 when we all know that we have a flop in our economy. And then from that on, the government policy is to look at the past. What are we going to do with our industries, because we spend a lot of investment on our own industry already. Are we going to change to computer? Are we going to change to some other thing? At that time, I think, and now if we look back, everything is right, that you still based on the industry that you are very strong and you have capable people. But as in other countries, Singapore, Malaysia, we are based on something very manual, very labor intensive. We like to do things by our hand. But 4.0, Thailand 4.0 is embarking on another thing where we call digital economy, which is based on the same industry or similar industry that we have, but how are we going to make it more innovation, more competitive, more effectiveness by using the digitalization of everything that we do. And you heard the Bank of Thailand this morning about the word prompt pay. I like this word very much because in English, prompt pay means pay instantly. But in Thai, prompt means ready, ready to pay. I'm not quite sure whether that is good or not. You pay fast. And people like the whole thing. But again, when you think of this technology, even when Faiz mentioned to me just right now, do you know blockchain? I said, well, I heard of that about 8 months ago, and then I don't understand it. So I tried to find out from various people what is blockchain until I gather all the information. Because IT people, they never be able to explain to me.
They speak different language.
Yes. So I gather that blockchain is for accountant, if you try to understand it. One block is one subledger. One block is one passbook. So in the future, you don't have subledger. Everyone just have their block. So one block is yourself. Its good thing is you have the track record of all your financial information. So your creditworthiness is in your block. If you share that block with the another party, then you have creditworthiness. And Faiz asked me a very good and very valid question. And where is the accountant? No one ever think of accounting when they have this blockchain. When they think of fintech, everything is digitalization, try to get data, try to get information in the very fastest way that they can. Because in the very near future, or you have heard already, big data, big data. Big data means you want to gather all the information everywhere and also into your daily life. They want to know when are you going to buy things, what sort of thing that you buy, when, at night time, at morning time. It's very interesting. It happens to me a week ago. I left my house to buy something at about 8 p.m. To go to one of the superstore. And then after I finish everything, come back to my car. And suddenly I heard from my mobile, ting. I just look at it. It said, from here, go back home, 70 minutes. Interesting. And I went back to my home and asked my son, who are very knowledgeable about all this tech. He said, because you have your GPS, you link with this, you link with that app, then this is artificial intelligence. They have made program, they have made this equipment memorize whatever you have, and then they try to understand your transaction, and then they just try to be very intelligent by telling you that 17 minutes you arrive home because you just come from your home. So you have to go back. But you say, well, I don't want to go back home, then that's it. Then you change your GPS and then you go to some other place, they recalculate. So this is what we are talking about. And the point I like to make right now is no technology, they think about accountant. Accounting is not in the scene at this moment. So I think we better need to understand and then see how the accounting professions, how we going to do. Because a lot of people say, well, I look at the survey about 3 months ago, international survey. They said one of the professions that will be extinct, accounting profession. But maybe they are wrong. They look at different views. The Thai survey from Labor Department, one of the profession that is very popular, accounting profession is one of the 10. So the thing is pros and cons. It depends on how we're going to adapt ourselves.
So I think it's very interesting, and I just want to go back to Kun Prasan's comment earlier about those initiatives. I think you mentioned about prompt pay, okay, and I think I'm not sure how many of us in this room have already registered the service of prompt pay, but I'm one of that. So okay, maybe just ask for maybe specific example. Okay, I think this morning you have heard from Thailand in terms of our Ministry of Commerce on the e-filing initiative, the central bank on the e-payment. Maybe from Singapore, I mean, could you give us maybe 1 or 2 examples of any specific initiative that you can think of or can share with us?
Actually, similar initiatives are happening in Singapore. We're always looking into central payments. So all the banks have jumped into it. So growingly, every bank you can make payment from your handphone. But really the challenge with this digital economy, and every country is scratching their head to find an answer. How do you collect taxes? Who is selling, who is collecting, who's making the profit? And I don't think we're going to get the answer anytime soon. I think all the countries are, the big countries will say it's theirs. The smaller countries, we keep a bit quiet. Yeah, it's a borderless world. Yeah. But having said that, it also is empowering for small traders. Even as small, I give an example. I order T-shirts, hand-printed T-shirts from Hawaii. And this is a small family business. Because you can order through internet, digital, they can export to anywhere in the world. The marketplace is not just Hawaii, but the whole world. Same thing, anyone in Thailand, if you got a skill set, you can produce something that someone is interested, you can sell it to the whole world. You're not caught. But the real question is, having said that, how does the country collect the taxes from this person? Is it our income or is it somebody else's income? And that's a challenge. And I don't think any government has found the answer yet.
But I think, I mean, maybe just to share, I think in Thailand, I think our revenue department is also thinking a lot of things about this e-tax and all. Yeah. So again, I think that's something the tax authority is looking at. Yeah. How about in Malaysia?
Well, I think I've mentioned some already, in the sense that at the government level, they're doing procurement and payments and all that through digital. And in fact, it's now spawned a whole bunch of private service companies trying to do things. So we have a company, for example, called MyEG, where literally they will go and get your insurance and the road tax and send it to your office. So we're now seeing the next wave, which is building off the government's infrastructure to do private sector things. But if I kind of bring it back to the profession itself, obviously many of the things that were mentioned this morning, I think all of us are looking at. You know, how do we, as a profession, how do we communicate with our members better? So for example, we have in MIA, we have an app. But actually the app is ready to tell my members how much discount they get. So whenever they go to a restaurant, they show the MIA card, they get 5%. So in Malaysia, if you go to Audi, Mercedes, Volkswagen, you get 6% discount for being MIA member. But you have to show your app. So this is giving value back, right? But it's also to encourage them to read the app, because I also send them boring things like circulars, reminders, tax circulars, and so on. So one is that I think as a profession, we have to recognize, I mean, I've got 32,000 members. Not everyone's going to read an email. I have to figure out how to get information across to them. but also at the same time, I need to get feedback. So like, we did a survey. It took us 3 months, and only 15% replied. And I said, well, that's good, but that's not good enough. So that's one, the challenge of profession, right? Talking to members and so on. The second part, which I think we've mentioned already in passing, is our clients themselves changing, and how are we responding to this? Something just to put on the table. All the big accounting firms are doing this, and I'm sure it will seep down, is this. Our clients know that they can cheat. And how can they cheat? Because auditors do things by sampling, right? So you can always tell. They know auditor always come in, let's say, November. So the November book always perfect. But then when you leave December, they change the books. So the big thinking now in audit is, how do I not sample? How do I take 100% of the data? And not even taking reports, We're talking about dumping raw data from the client systems into our systems, and then we write our queries and so on. Now, most corporates are scared of this, right? Because it means that we can spy on them 365 days a year. But that's the direction it's going. Because when you look at complicated companies like banks, they can do 500,000 transactions a day. How can you ever hope to substantiate a meaningful sample? You can't. So I think that's the direction that auditors now need to start thinking, which is big data is not just about analytics and looking at it from a marketing point of view. From an audit point of view, how ready are you? What servers have you got? What capacity have you got to take raw data from your clients and play with it? Right? You cannot do it on the client system, right? Because the client system, you might, God forbid, you might make the system crash and then they'll sue the auditors. So you have to figure out how to bring that data across. So that I think is something to start thinking about, which is that as auditors, and the last point I'll just put is this. There's a lot of noise around audit rotation around the world. Interestingly, I found, looking at the UK data, that instead of it rotating from big firms to little firms, it still stayed among the big firms. And when we analyzed it, the reason is they recognize that at the moment, only the big firms have that capabilities, right? So if you want to compete with the bigger firms, you're going to have to figure out what's your value proposition in this data space.
Okay. I think that's a very good point. Actually, one of the questions also asked, I think, because you have mentioned that the auditor need to change their auditing procedures, and I think the audience asked, could you share what you have done in Malaysia and whether is it acceptable by the regulators? I think you mentioned about the analysis of the big data, and I think just to follow on that, the auditing concept is based on sampling. So by taking the whole data and analyze it, is that something that we have expanded our role and responsibility?
Well, that's the direction we're going. But let me share with you the challenges. One of the things we also look for in data is controls. And we're finding that many clients will put transactions electronically, but the controls are not. They're all done manually. So that's a bit of an issue. Secondly is, there's a lot of garbage in that data. I did one for a telco recently, and we spent most of the audit effort just cleaning the data. So in the end, we didn't find anything, except we had lots of ICMs on how the data needs to improve. And then you realize that the clients are making decisions on really bad data. And why is that, right? You think about it. Most corporates in Asia get bigger by buying another corporate. So if you look at a bank in Malaysia, there are maybe 8, 9 local banks left. Each bank is actually a merger of at least 5 different banks, 5 different systems, 5 different ways of collecting system data. So then, of course, when you put it all into one, it's even more, well, we have a word in Malaysia, rojak. It's all mixed up. So, as an auditor, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
How do you take that raw data, which is complete nonsense, and try and make some sense of it?
Khun Prasan, you want to add something?
Yes. I think we spent quite some time talking about technology, and then Faiz have mentioned pull us back to the profession. I think it is very valid. And Khun Bulla said, have the external auditors expand their scope from sampling and then to full test, 100% test. I think you have no choice. Auditor has no choice. Because of what? Because if you look at the things that auditor is doing right now, when you digitalization the whole business, you see a lot of transaction coming in very fast. And not only from your local company, come from everywhere. Because it's no border. Someone is buying things from your company from somewhere. And you talk about logistics of sending things that you buy from US come to you. And then maybe perhaps you have to return something because you don't want it. You want just part of it. And then you talk about doing audits. Even internal auditors now, I think a lot of people within this room is internal auditor. Internal auditor is now moving ahead because they cannot do audit just like they do in the past. They do more than external auditors, but still not fast enough. You talk about fraud in companies. If any company come to me and say, well, my system is very good, no fraud, I don't believe. Someone somewhere is cheating all the time because they see loopholes, they see gaps of time. They always do lapping things. They always cheat this, cheat that. And as Faiz mentioned, auditors come in, they clear everything. But the transaction before you reach at the date that you come in, you cannot go back and look at it by manual. So right now, I think internal auditors, they use the same thing. They use new tools to just scan everything, but they need to set up parameters, what they want to see as exceptional items. And then from there, they pull out all the exceptional items and then send team down to look at it. Whether it's okay, maybe it's okay, or a lot of time. I think the survey is about 80% of those exceptional items, they found it irregularities, fraud. Someone is cheating on the company. So I think external auditors have no choice. In the past, you do audit of retail. A lot of people told me long time before, if you test 25% of the store, that's fine. How can you believe in that? You say, well, internal control is very good. If it's so good, why they still have fraud? I think external auditor has to answer that. And the way to answer is you have to become trusted person. If auditors become non-trusted person, then I would say, well, the profession would be extinct. I think that's the whole thing.
All right, I think Dato have talked about the SMP, and I think I would like to touch on a little bit on the SME, and there's a question come from the audience. I think this is probably the person who asked from Thailand. The question is, in reality, most medium and SME firm in Thailand lack of knowledge in IT, especially the ERP. Okay, so although most of them do not have ERP, we are now moving to digital base. How does FAP and government help medium and SME firm? And secondly, does FAP have any plan to educate the accountant and how?
Okay. Well, that is true. SME, if you look at numbers, specifically for Thailand, you have about 1,200 companies in the stock market. I think about 750 in the main market, another 300 something in the what we call MAI, which is I don't know the full name, but they call it smaller market. But the statistic that I know, we have about more than 500,000 registered company in Thailand, and most of them are smaller company or medium size. But about 10,000 of that, they are sometimes bigger than the company in the stock market. What we have done, FAP, I think first of all, we know that all the smaller companies, they probably don't have the ability to invest much. But again, software is now the price of software is now cheaper and cheaper. So I think a lot of companies, small companies, they have used computer to back up their system. A couple of things that we are now doing, and I mentioned to my friend Gerard that FAP sponsor a group of IT people to come up with a software or applications whereby smaller company, shop owners, you don't need to know accounting, you just have this application, and then there are several buttons that you have to learn how to push. That's not very difficult, because if you sell in cash, then you push S1, S2, S3. You can have credit cards. But that's for retail, small business. I don't mean manufacturing companies, small business. And from that, at the back of that system, you have the simple accounting system there, who translate all the transaction into the accounting records. And then at the end of the day, you should have a report, simple report, sales report, and then you have a summary of your sales, how much is from cash, how much is credit, how much is credit card. That's the main thing. But unfortunately, because in coming up with this system, the government also want to link it with the e-payment system. In order to do what? In order to ensure that Thailand, all the shop owners, or you are a smaller company or medium-sized company, you have only one set of accounts. I think you all remember we have one set of accounts now, because when they announced the one set of accounts, of the 500,000 SME, 450 register for one set of accounts. So I think everyone has already done so. So from next year onwards, everyone is one set of accounts. And in the near future, once you embark into that system, it means you link to the e-payment system. E-payment system linked to banks. Bank also information that link to, unfortunately, link to the revenue department.
So you can't escape anymore.
So you see that what we are now doing is try to help the SME in terms of how can you cope with the sort of digitalization. Whether you want to go back to manual, I think in time you find that e-payment system will push you. Pressure will come, and then you have to go through all those e-payment systems. So you receive revenue, you have to pay anyway. I even said to several of my colleagues that if you go to a restaurant in the Sukhumvit area, you go to a restaurant and then they ask you whether you want to pay cash or credit. If you want to pay cash, they said, well, 30% discount. How come they have 30% discount? Because, I guess, they don't pay tax. But in the near future, once you come to this one set of account, you use e-payment, and you use to pay by your ID card, then this sort of thing, information is flow through everywhere in a structured way. And I think you probably digitalize yourself already by using those e-payment systems.
Okay. Yes.
You know, it's, I'm just listening to Kun Prasan's point about e-payment. It's the stated Malaysian government policy to get rid of cash. Okay? And I remember asking a senior official, what's the thinking behind this? And they said, look, we reckon that there's a lot of underground economy going on that we're not taxing and we don't know anything about, and it's facilitated by cash. So as an example, there's this horrible photograph going around of one of our corrupt official with 114 million ringgit all piled up at cash in his room. So it is the stated policy of government to get rid of cash. And the way they're doing that is by making it inevitable that when you go and pay for anything, even a newspaper, you can use a card, right? So that is a direction that I think most governments in Asia are also moving towards. Even our doing GST and VAT was to catch the SMEs. Because, you know, the tax officials will tell me, it's very strange, they all say no profit. All say no profit, no tax, but they're all driving Mercedes. How? And one of the interesting outcomes after the first year of doing VAT is that they've actually reckoned there's at least 40,000 companies that underdeclared their tax. Now, to me, I'm worried. I want to know which 40,000 auditors signed off on those accounts, right? But it raises a question that the SME market, many of them have, frankly, not done their part. Why should they not pay tax? Because they enjoy the peace and security of the country, the infrastructure. Why are they not contributing back? So our point of view in Malaysia and MIA is very simple. Everyone should pay the right tax. Not $1 more, not $1 less. But you have to pay the right tax.
I think that's a very good comment. And actually, just to echo your point on the use of cash, I think a couple of months ago, I attended a lunch talk by the Thai central bank governors. And actually, very interesting, he talked about this cashless society. Okay, so nobody, need to carry cash. Okay, it's not only just the cost, but also the security. And I think one interesting fact, like for example, for financial institution, every time when you put in the money into the ATM machine, there's a cost. For every 10,000 baht, the cost of putting into the ATM machine cost, can anyone guess how much? 60 to 75 baht for every 10,000 baht that you put into an ATM machine. So that's the cost of operating from the financial institution. So I think a lot of government have a lot of initiative to move away and try to be more like cashless society. So, Gerard, you want to add
I
something?
think we have the same thinking, but it will never reach a situation of total cashless society for Singapore. Reason being is we have a very large proportion, over 1.4 million foreign workers in Singapore at different levels. And these people prefer to be paid in cash because they remit money back to their families in their own country. And there will always continue to exist shops that cater to these foreign workers, whether it's the card for your handphone, biscuits, drinks, all in cash basis. So that part of the economy will not disappear. But the rest of it, when you do purchases or that by and large is caught by the digital economy. So even GST only triggers off. You're obliged to register for GST if your turnover is $1 million and above. So there'll still be a lot of these food vendors that are below $1 million that will not pay GST. But there are other ways of getting around it, and usually like our food court, there's a central bidder for the food court, and his job is to control it. And for him to make sure that there's proper accounting is because he collects percentage of revenue. So there are always sub-agents and all that you can use for it. And therefore, in Singapore, for the average individual, we don't even submit income tax returns anymore because your salaries, everything is caught digitally. So once a year, they will actually send you the assessment without you filling any form. They already know how much you earn through all the central computerized system. Yeah. But the threat to SMPs is this. Because, as I said, the bulk of businesses will still be small businesses, family businesses, and so forth. So growingly, audit exemption, the cap is growing. So in Singapore, with the forthcoming change in the law, companies with $10 million Sing dollars turnover and below a year is exempted from requiring an audit. So all the small audits is going to disappear if that business doesn't borrow from a bank. Of course, if you borrow from a bank, the bank will still insist on having the audit statements. But depending on how much you borrow, if the bank takes a security, they don't even need to have audit statement. They're quite happy with it. So that is the threat to the small practitioners more than anything else.
So what do you see, what would be the threat, okay, in terms of having technology or digital economy, and how do you plan to address those threats? So maybe, Gerard, you want to?
No, in general, for Singapore, it is important for our survival because, as I said, we have a shrinking population. If we don't move quickly to the digital economy and operate in the old way where you have a lot of usage of manpower, we cannot sustain ourselves. We cannot survive into the future. So for us, it is a must-do. And apart from digital economy, in fact, we have a company called Newtonomy that is heavily sponsored. We're already testing out driverless car, driverless bus. So all that within the next 3 to 4 years, you expect to see it running the road because we don't have enough people to be drivers. You know, unless you import.
You place your life to the
well, they're testing.
driverless
We just had one accident, so but nobody injured. But you have to push the pace to go into that. I run a hospital, and everything is now robotized. The doctor key in the prescription. By the time the patient go to the pharmacy, it's already packed for the patient. And you got to review all the processes and cut down the number of steps that involve human beings. But which means the auditor of the future must understand IT because how do you audit this new trail? You know, there's no more paper in between. Do you understand enough of the IT to understand the system in order to have a meaningful audit of it? So I head a group internal auditor for all the government hospitals in Singapore. And my people needs to be trained in analytics. And that's the only way we can catch fraud. And we have been very successful in the last few months, catching quite a few frauds using analytics to look for patterns and things. Sampling audit for that sort of scale with millions on transaction doesn't work anymore.
I think you mentioned earlier about the need for forensic accounting.
Correct.
Yeah. Dato, you want to share? What do you see as a threat?
Well, I think we've discussed some of it already about evidence and complexity and so on. But I think one thing maybe just to leave you with, which worries us in Malaysia, and we're seeing this as a trend around the world, which is unemployed youth. So for example, in Malaysia, in the next few years, something like 2.9 million kids are coming into the workplace. And we have to think, what job are they going to do? And when we look around the world, we see, you know, unemployment of youth in Greece is 50%. Unemployment in the Middle East of youth is 30%. So if we don't do something for that generation, we will all suffer. Because who do you think is going to pay for the pensions and all that? It will be that generation. So to me, the digital economy, firstly, is inevitable because that's where the world is going. But the thing that we have to think about is how do we also create meaningful jobs? Because that's the other interesting statistic coming out. That around the world, yes, you know, growth of GDP is there. But what they found is that productivity has been going down. So that means we've not had that increase in productivity. So to me, digital is not just about survival, but it is also about trying to encourage our young ones to find a place for them in the new world. What will they do? But I think part of the clue to me is not building things for other people. I mean, I was just looking last night, you know, the iPhone 6s, the cost of the components is $200 US, but they sell it for $699. Okay? And then I was told the iPhone 7 is only like 15 cents more, and they charge still $700 US. So are we building the $200 US, or are we doing the difference? And I think that's the challenge. You know, how do we help our clients, our kids, to find a new role, a new way of doing things? And, you know, I mean, Gerard mentioned about teaching kids how to do apps. We have app places in Malaysia where people do things. You know, like Grab Car, all those things. Actually, we have a Malaysian who's actually created one. And we're actually forcing them to go out and say, maybe you don't need to be an accountant, lawyer, doctor, banker, you know. Maybe you need the clever ones, to sit down and figure out how do you employ people in this new world using this new technology. So of course, as accountants, we have our role. Our role is to enable these things to happen. Because one thing about these clever people who make products, they don't know how to account.
I quickly add on to this. A very good illustration of what Faiz just said. In Singapore, if I mention Uber, you think of taxi, right? But in Singapore, Uber now do food delivery, they compete with DHL, they do with everybody. So a lot of young people now don't want to have a full-time job. They all sign up as Uber because they have freedom, they're in control of their time, and then they just do delivery and things. So everything is happening so quickly that it's a challenge for government to decide what is the appropriate thing for the future generation and trying to understand what motivates them. I know a lot of young people who are now preferring to freelance and be their own boss, so to speak.
Yes, I think three areas that I can think of right now. First one is you talk about threat. Digital economy, then threat should be cyber security. Security will come into scene. How are you going to ensure that everything on air, it's controlled? Someone can hack into it. How are you going to control over that? It happens everywhere because some of the clever kids always try to hack the system. How are you going to control over that? That's one of the threats. The second thing is, which Dato has already mentioned, back to the educational system. Are we preparing the new generation to cope with digital economy, for example? Are we training them in the university or throughout the 12, 14, 16 years using what I call is remember only? But you know that in the near future, you need a lot of people who have analytical skills. Now they talk about data scientists. Means you have a lot of data. How are you going to have someone who look at that data and set up parameters and then try to spot out where are the things that they want to look at and use those information. So how we, education system, are we prepare ourselves, our next generation for that? And then back to us. I think the threat is, a lot of people say, are we going to lose our job? I think one of the words that I like to say here, I think we have to adapt quick enough. You cannot just say, well, if you are doing bookkeeping, then I still want to do bookkeeping all my life. Then if you don't adapt, then your job lost because they don't use you anymore. So I think that's a threat that we all have to face. But we don't have to worry that you lost all the job, but you just adapt to change, which during the past 40, 50 years, accountant has already adapted to change, and we adapt very good, in a very good way. We still have short of accountant, especially in this country, short of auditors. The day before I went to discuss with our SEC. SEC told me that SET also told me, we don't have enough auditor to sign the listed company account. What's that mean? New IPO cannot enter the stock market because you don't have auditor, you don't have enough accountant to do the accounting work. So you're not going to lose your job, but you have to change.
Okay, I think we about time, and we know that we are standing before lunch. So maybe each of the panelists can maybe give a quick conclusion, okay, and then I think we'll end the session.
Actually, to put in a balance, if you look at my institute, over 60% of my members are accountants in business. They are not auditors. So I think being an accountant, it prepares you to be an entrepreneur, to start up your business, to go into it. So if you only think about a narrow perspective audit, then you worry a lot about the challenges. But if you think that having studied accountancy and being an accountant prepare you for the brave new world, and all you need is to understand what is happening, and you can go out there and be an entrepreneur, then really there's nothing to worry about. Very few people will stay as auditors because I don't know about in Thailand, in Singapore, even parents don't want their children to be auditors because they say there's no life. It's 24/7, and usually auditors end up marrying auditors because the only people they see are the ones in the office. So don't worry, you are prepared to be the entrepreneurs of the future.
Okay, Dato.
Well, going back to the topic, digital economy, I hope that you all now understand, as Kun Prasan says, that we need to change, right? We need to change because our clients are changing, and we need to make ourselves relevant for the new world. But to the point of obsolescence, what I would say is this. I would not have encouraged my daughter to do accounting if I didn't believe there was a future, no future to this job. I still fervently believe that there is a role for accountants because at the end of the day, we're trusted.
Well, I think since we talk about digitalization, I would say that don't afraid of technologies. First of all, you have to change your mind. Don't afraid of technologies. See that as opportunities, but how you're going to grab that opportunity. But I note down here, after all, you have to work professionally, ethically. That's more important to our profession.
Okay, I think over the last 90 minutes, you probably find this panel discussion very useful. And I know there have been a lot of questions. I still keep receiving. I think we have over 30 questions that coming in. So I try to address as many as I can. But I think some of the questions can be continued or addressed in the afternoon session because they are asking very specific about cloud accounting or cloud computing, those kind of things. So I think in the afternoon session, we will touch on those areas. So finally, I would like to thank to our three distinguished panelists for their view and their perspective on ASEAN with regard to this digital economy. So please give them a round of applause.
การเปลี่ยนแปลงที่เกิดขึ้นถือว่าเป็นสิ่งที่ดีนะคะสำหรับผู้ประกอบการวิชาชีพบัญชีในการกระตุ้นตัวเองและพัฒนาตัวเองเพื่อที่จะตอบรับกับเศรษฐกิจดิจิทัลที่เข้ามามีบทบาทกับทุกกิจกรรมของเราในอนาคตค่ะนี่คือทั้งหมดนะคะที่มาฝากกันในรายการ Money Forum คุณผู้ชมสามารถติดตามรายการย้อนหลังได้ที่ www.moneychannel.co.th ดิฉันสรวณีพรหมเสนและทีมงานขอลาไปก่อนพบกันใหม่ค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ